Hey, my name is Caleb Hart. I'm 36 years old, and I live on a hill just outside Alder Creek, Vermont, in a farmhouse my grandfather built and my wife made beautiful. I do carpentry for a living. Custom bookshelves, farmhouse tables, porch swings, the occasional rocking chair for somebody's new grandbaby. In the fall, I sell firewood, and in the spring, I press cider from the 12 apple trees behind the house. It's quiet work, honest work. The kind of work where the wood doesn't ask you how you're holding up and doesn't look at you sideways when you don't answer. People in town don't call me Caleb much anymore. They call me the widower on the hill. I know they don't mean it cruelly. Small towns name things the way rivers carve stone, slowly and without permission, but every time I hear it, it does the same thing to me. It takes the 36 years of my life and folds them down into one single fact. Hannah has been gone for 3 years now. Ovarian cancer. 14 months from the first doctor's visit to the last one. She was 31. The first year, people brought casseroles. The second year, they brought invitations. Church suppers, bowling nights, a cousin visiting from Burlington who was just so nice, Caleb. You'd really like her. By the third year, they mostly stopped bringing anything at all, and honestly, that was easier. I'd built a life that ran like a well-oiled jig. Up at 5:30. Coffee black. On the porch. Where the valley fog sits in the low field like spilled milk. Shop until noon. Deliveries in the afternoon. Dinner standing up at the counter. The radio on low, not for the music, just so the house would make a sound that wasn't me. There was one thing in my routine that didn't quite belong to me, and that was the cottage. At the bottom of my hill, where my land meets the county road, there's a small white cottage with a green door. Hannah's grandmother lived there once. After she passed, Hannah turned it into a little rental, but she had a rule about it that drove the property manager in town half crazy. She never rented to the highest offer. She rented to whoever needed a soft landing. A nurse going through a divorce. A young veteran and his dog. Hannah said the cottage wasn't an income, it was a hand held out, and she priced it like one. After she died, I let it sit empty for 2 years. Couldn't stand the idea of lights on down there that she hadn't switched on. Then last spring, the lawyer reminded me that taxes don't grieve, and Marjorie at the realty office said she had someone. A young mother and a little girl, new to town, waitressing at the Bluebird Diner. First and last month was going to be a stretch for her, Marjorie warned me. I heard myself say the words before I decided to say them. Tell her the deposit's waived if she keeps the garden alive. That's how Nora Quinn came to live at the bottom of my hill. I'd be lying if I said I noticed much at first. I saw her car, a tired silver Corolla with one mismatched door. I saw a child's drawings taped facing out in the cottage windows, suns with too many rays, a cat the size of a horse. On Tuesdays, when I drove past on my way to the lumberyard, I saw a little girl in red rain boots stomping puddles in the driveway and a woman with dark hair tied up in a scarf, always moving, carrying groceries, carrying laundry, carrying the girl like life was a series of heavy things and her arms were the only truck she had. We waved. Landlord and tenant. That was the whole of it for almost 2 months. The rent came on the first of the month, in cash, in an envelope with my name written so neatly it looked typed, like she was determined that even her money would be polite. Then October came, and with it the Alder Creek Harvest Fair. I almost didn't go. I hadn't gone since Hannah. But I'd built the pie auction stand for the elementary school that year, donated work, and Principal Daniels asked me to come make sure the legs sat level on the grass. So I went, planning to be there 20 minutes, tighten 4 bolts, shake 2 hands, go home. The fairground was everything I'd been avoiding for 3 years. Hay bales and string lights. Kids with cider sticky faces. The smell of fried dough and wood smoke. Half the town saying Caleb Hart as I live and breathe, and the other half saying nothing at all, just doing that soft tilt of the head, the one that means there he is, poor thing. I fixed the stand. I was kneeling in the grass with a wrench, finishing the last bolt, when it happened. A small body hit me from the side like a cannonball made of corduroy. 2 arms wrapped around my neck, and a voice, high and cracking with tears, sobbed one word into my ear. Daddy! The whole row of people by the pie stand went quiet. I froze with the wrench still in my hand. The little girl was shaking, face buried in my collar, breathing in those fast hiccuping gulps kids do when they've been lost, and scared longer than their courage could carry them. Red rain boots. The girl from the cottage. She'd been separated from her mother in the crowd, I'd learn later. Maybe 10 minutes, which to a 5-year-old is a year. And in that ocean of strangers' legs, she'd seen one familiar thing: the man from the hill, the truck wave man. And her scrambled, terrified little heart had reached for the safest word it knew. I could feel the eyes on us. I knew exactly what this looked like. And I knew, the way you know weather coming, that whatever I did in the next 10 seconds was going to be repeated in the Bluebird Diner by noon tomorrow. Somewhere behind me, a woman's voice said, not quite quietly enough, "Well, the widower on the hill, so that's why the rent's so cheap." A couple of people laughed. And then Nora arrived, breaking through the crowd, hair half out of its scarf, face white as paper. She saw her daughter in my arms. She saw the circle of watching faces. She heard, I'm certain she heard, the tail end of that laughter. I watched the humiliation land on her like rain on a window, and I watched her square her shoulders against it anyway. Ellie. Her voice was steady by force. "Ellie, baby, I'm here." The girl, Ellie, lifted her head, saw her mother, and the spell broke. But she didn't let go of my neck. She was still too scared to trade safety for safety. Nora reached for her. "I'm so sorry," she said to me, low and fast, the apology of a woman who'd had a lot of practice apologizing for taking up space. "She knows you from the hill. She sees your truck. I'm so sorry. She's never done that. I don't remember deciding what to do. I just remember doing it." I stood up slowly, with Ellie still on my arm, so the whole pie stand row could see and hear me plainly. I gave her the wrench to hold, which is the oldest trick in the world for stopping a child's tears, and I said, calm and clear as a level bubble, "You've got good instincts, kid. Always run to the guy with the tools." Ellie hiccuped, looked at the wrench, gripped it with both hands like a scepter. The laughter that went around this time was a different kind of laughter. The kind that lets everyone off the hook. The kind that turns a scandal back into a Tuesday. I handed Ellie to her mother, and as I did, quietly, just for Nora, I said, "Don't apologize." She did the smartest thing a lost kid can do. She picked a fixed point. Nora looked at me then. Really looked for the first time in 2 months of waves. Her eyes were brown with a ring of tired around them, and there was something in them I recognized because I'd seen it in my own mirror for 3 years. The look of a person who is carrying everything and is so used to no one offering to take a corner of it that they've stopped expecting hands. "Thank you," she said. Bolts tight, I called to Principal Daniels, and I went home, 25 minutes after I'd arrived. But that night, for the first time in 3 years, the house felt quiet in a way I noticed. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. There's a difference, and I'd been pretending there wasn't. And at the bottom of the hill, the cottage lights were on, and I caught myself standing at the kitchen window with my coffee gone cold, thinking about a little girl who'd run through a crowd of 200 strangers because she'd decided, on no evidence at all, except a wave from a truck, that I was safe. Kids decide things like that fast. It takes the rest of us a lot longer. 3 days after the fair, the first cold snap came through, and at 6 in the morning my phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. "Mr. Hart? It's Nora. From the cottage. I'm so sorry to call this early." A pause, and I could hear her gathering herself. The way people do before asking for something they've decided is shameful. The heater's making a sound. A bad sound. I turned it off because I didn't want, with Ellie in the house, I didn't want to risk it. "We're fine. We have blankets. I just thought you should know, as the owner, there's no rush." There's no rush. It was 28 degrees outside. "Give me 30 minutes," I said. The cottage was clean as a church and cold as a barn. Nora opened the door wearing 2 sweaters, and behind her, Ellie sat at the kitchen table inside a sleeping bag, wearing a wool hat with a pom-pom, eating cereal like an Arctic explorer, completely delighted with the adventure. The drawings I'd seen taped in the windows were everywhere inside too. The horse-sized cat featured heavily. The furnace was older than I was, and the blower motor had finally quit. I could get the part in town, but the part wasn't really the problem. The problem was the whole unit was a funeral waiting for a date. "I'm replacing it," I said. "Whole thing. It's overdue, and it's on me. It's the landlord's job." "How much will?" She stopped herself, started again, more carefully. "If it affects the rent, I need to know now, so I can plan." "It doesn't affect the rent, Mr. Hart." "Caleb. And it doesn't affect the rent. That furnace was old when your daughter's cat drawings were still just regular-sized cats. From inside the sleeping bag, Ellie said with enormous dignity, "Her name is Biscuit and she's big because she eats brave food." Brave food, I repeated. Broccoli. Nora translated, and for 1 second, just one, she smiled and the tired ring around her eyes loosened, and I thought, there she is. There's the person under all that carrying. It took me 2 days to swap the furnace, and here's the thing nobody tells you about working in a house with a 5-year-old in it. You don't get to just work. You get a foreman. Ellie pulled a kitchen chair to the edge of the basement stairs, sat down with a juice box, and supervised. She asked what every tool was called. She informed me my hammer was old. She told me, in strict confidence, that her teacher had a fish, that her old apartment had a mean radiator that clanked, and that her dad lived far away and had a loud car. I noticed Nora go still at the edge of the kitchen when Ellie said that last one. Just for a beat, the way you go still when something sharp shifts inside a bag you're carrying. When the new furnace kicked on for the first time, low and even, Ellie put her hands over the vent like it was a campfire and announced, "It purrs like Biscuit." Nora made me stay for dinner. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't flirtation, it was arithmetic. I had given something. She had no spare money to give back, so she gave what she had, which was a pot of chicken and rice that could have made a grown man homesick for a home he never had. I hadn't eaten dinner at a table with other people in over a year. I'd forgotten the sound of it. Fork clink and kid chatter and somebody saying, "Pass the bread." After that, things found a rhythm, and I want to be honest about how it happened because it wasn't romance. Not at first. It was repairs. The cottage was a sweet old thing with bad knees, and I started fixing it the way you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. The gutter that overflowed onto the porch. The bedroom window painted shut since before the moon landing. The back step that wobbled. I'd come down on Saturday mornings with my toolbox, and Nora would come out with coffee. And somewhere along the way it stopped being me fixing her house and started being us fixing the house. She was good with her hands and embarrassed about it, like competence was something she'd been teased for. She'd held a lot of jobs I learned in pieces. Waitress, hotel housekeeping, a year at a vet clinic she'd loved and had to leave when they moved for her ex's job. She could cock a tub line straighter than I could. The day we rebuilt the back porch railing is the day I think of as the real beginning. It takes 2 people to set a long rail, 1 to hold each end. I picked up the board, and without me asking, Nora picked up her end, and we stood there, 16 feet apart, holding the same piece of wood level between us. "A little higher on your side," I said. "My side is fine. Your side is low." I checked the level. Her side was fine. My side was low. "Don't say it," I told her. "I'm not saying anything," she said in the exact tone of someone saying everything, and Ellie, sitting on the steps with her juice box, said, "Mommy's face is saying it," and Nora laughed so hard she nearly dropped the rail. That's what it was. Those weeks. Not sparks. Something slower and rarer. 2 people discovering they could hold opposite ends of the same board, and the board would come out level. She started leaving a plate for me on Saturdays whether I'd planned to stay or not. I started cutting firewood for the cottage into stove lengths without mentioning it. Ellie started keeping a special mug at my house, plastic purple, with a chip on the handle, for the days Nora's shift ran long and the school bus let her off at the bottom of my driveway, and I'd watch her until her mother got home. We did puzzles. She beat me at Go Fish in ways that suggested cheating I could never prove. She drew me into the family portraits taped to the cottage windows. A tall stick man holding what I chose to believe was a hammer, standing next to the horse-sized cat. I should have known the town would do its quiet math. At the lumberyard, Walt rang up my order and said, too casually, "Building something down at the cottage again?" 3rd weekend in a row, by my count. At the Bluebird, where I'd started stopping in for lunch on Thursdays, which happened to be a shift Nora worked, which is a fact I'd have denied under oath, the ladies in the corner booth went quiet whenever she refilled my coffee, and unquiet the moment she walked away. And one cold evening in late November, the walls between Nora and me came down the rest of the way, not with a crash, just with a draft, the way an old door swings open on its own. Ellie was asleep on my couch under the purple blanket, one sock on, Go Fish cards scattered like fallen leaves. Nora had come straight from a double shift to pick her up, and I'd heated up stew because she had that gray look of a person who'd been running on coffee and counter scraps since dawn. We sat in the kitchen. The wood stove ticked. And maybe because she was too tired to keep the walls fed, she told me. His name was Travis. They'd been married 6 years. He wasn't a monster, she said. And then she sat with that sentence and corrected it. The way you correct a measurement you've been getting wrong for years. He was the kind of man who shrinks you an inch at a time, she said. Who tells the dinner table story where you're always the punchline? Who keeps the bank account in his name for convenience? Who lets every job, every town, every plan be his until one day you look up and you can't point to a single thing in your life that you chose? When he left, it was for a woman from his office, and he'd moved 2 states away, and the child support came every few months when it came like weather. The day the divorce was final, she said, looking at her hands, I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot, and I realized I didn't know what music I liked. 31 years old, he'd had opinions about it for so long, I'd lost track of mine. I sat there, and I couldn't think of one song that was mine. The stove ticked. On the couch, Ellie sighed in her sleep, the sigh of a person whose biggest problem was a fictional cat's vegetable intake. So I picked this town off a map, Nora said. Because it was far, and because the name sounded like a place where nothing happens. No offense. None taken. We're very proud of it. She smiled, and then she looked at me, and her voice changed. Your turn. And don't give me the 2-sentence version. I've heard the 2-sentence version. The whole town hands it out like a pamphlet. So I told her about Hannah. The real telling, not the pamphlet. How she alphabetized the spice rack and couldn't parallel park to save her life. How she sang harmonies to the radio in a kitchen that's been quiet for 3 years. How in the last months, when she was so tired, she made me promise not to let the cottage sit dark, because a house with nobody in it forgets how to be a house. And I'd broken that promise for 2 years because I couldn't stand to keep it. How I built things for other people's families all day and came home to a table I'd made for 6 and set for 1. I'm not stuck because I think she's coming back, I said. It was the first time I'd said any of this out loud, and my voice came out rough as sawdust. I'm stuck because moving forward felt like deciding the best part of my life was over, and no man wants to sign that. Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she said the thing that changed the weather in my chest. Maybe it's not a signature. Maybe it's a board. You don't have to put hers down. She nodded toward the couch, toward the sleeping kid, toward the whole improbable evening. You just have to be willing to pick up the other end of a new one. I looked at her, and the truth is, the kiss was right there, that night available, close as the salt. Neither of us reached for it. We were both carrying too much that was still settling. But when she scooped Ellie up, blanket and all, and I walked them out to the Corolla, and the cold came down off the hill smelling like snow, she stopped with her hand on the car door and said, Caleb, Thursday. It's not the coffee, is it? At the diner. The coffee's terrible, I said. I know, she said. I make it. And she drove down the hill, and I stood in my driveway grinning at nothing like a teenager, 36 years old, the widower on the hill, alive again, and scared to death about it. 2 weeks later, Travis's loud car pulled into the cottage driveway. I heard about it before I saw it, because in Alder Creek, news travels faster than cars. Walt called me from the lumberyard. Some fella in a Charger just asked Marjorie for directions to your cottage. Out-of-state plates. Thought you'd want to know. By the time I came down the hill with a cord of stove lengths I suddenly urgently needed to deliver, the Charger was parked crooked across the gravel, taking up the whole driveway the way some men take up a whole room. Travis was on the porch. Late 30s, gym arms, sunglasses pushed up in his hair in December. Nora stood in the doorway with the door mostly closed behind her, and I recognized her posture immediately because I'd seen it at the fair. Shoulders squared against incoming weather. I didn't pull in. I parked on the road shoulder, got out, and started unloading wood by the fence 50 feet away. Close enough. Not closer. This was her porch and her fight, and a man who barges into a woman's battles uninvited is just a different kind of Travis. I couldn't hear everything. I heard enough. He'd lost the job 2 states away. The woman from his office was gone too. And he'd had what he called a wake-up call, which, as he explained it loudly, meant he'd realized his daughter was being raised in a rented shack in the middle of nowhere by a waitress, and that any judge in the country would agree a girl needs her father, especially, and here his voice got that lawyer on TV smoothness, especially given the unstable living situation. Unless, of course, they could work something out about all that back child support Nora had been hounding him over. Sign a waiver on the arrears and he'd let the custody thing go. He said it exactly like that. Let it go. Like her daughter was a parking ticket. Then he noticed me. Help you with something, buddy. Delivering firewood, I said, and went on stacking it. He looked at the wood at the cottage at Nora, and I watched him do the same math the town had done, except meaner. He smiled. Oh, this is good. This'll look great in a filing. Mommy shacked up with the landlord. I set the log down slowly and I came over to the fence and I kept my voice level because I learned a long time ago that the man who raises his voice has already lost the argument. You can say anything you want about me, I said, but you're standing on a porch I maintain, threatening a tenant I'm responsible for, and your car is blocking egress from the property, which matters, because if you don't move it in the next few minutes, the sheriff's going to want it moved when he gets here. This is a small town. He's 3 minutes out on a slow day. Travis looked at me for a long moment, deciding what I was. I let him take his time. Then Nora spoke, and her voice didn't shake, and I think that surprised all three of us. Send your filing, Travis. You want to show a judge how I live? Good. I'll show him the school enrollment, the pediatrician records, the rent paid on time every month, and the child support ledger with all the blanks in it. You drove 11 hours to scare me out of money you owe your daughter. She opened the door behind her wider, not to invite him in, but so he could hear the cartoon music inside, the sound of the life he'd skipped. You should have spent that gas money on December. You're 4 months behind. He left the way men like that always leave, with a speech about lawyers and a lot of gravel noise, and the Charger roared down the county road, and the quiet came back in behind it like water. Nora sat down on the porch step. I came up the walk and sat on the step below her, not crowding, and for a minute we just let the cold do the talking. He'll really file, she said finally, not because he wants her, because he wants to not pay. He'll dress it up as fathering. Then we get you a lawyer. Caleb, I can't afford a... I said we. It came out of me plainly, no drama, the way you'd state a measurement. You've been holding your end of every board alone for 6 years. Put one end down. Just one. Let somebody hold it. She looked at me for a long time. Behind us, through the door, Ellie's cartoon hit its theme song, and a small voice sang along, fearless and off-key. Okay, Nora said. Quiet. Like a person trying a word in a new language. Okay. What came next wasn't dramatic. And I'm telling you that on purpose, because the dramatic version is a lie the movies sell. There was no courtroom showdown with gasping spectators. There was a lawyer in Montpelier named Diane with reading glasses on a chain who reviewed the support ledger and actually rubbed her hands together. There were papers. There was a custody evaluator, a kind, tired woman who visited the cottage on a Tuesday and saw the drawings and the windows and the new furnace and the vegetable garden Nora had kept alive past the first frost, better than the lease required. The evaluator asked Ellie what she liked about living here. Ellie gave it serious thought and said, My room is yellow, and my school has a fish, and Caleb is teaching me hammers. I got interviewed too. Landlord, the form said. I answered everything honestly, including the question under the questions, which the evaluator was professional enough to ask plainly, what was my relationship with the tenant? We're not together, I said, and then, because Hannah always said the whole truth or none of it, but I'd be lying if I told you I never think about it. Travis's filing fell apart the way badly built things do, all at once and at the first real load. Faced with a judge who'd seen the arrears, his lawyer advised settlement. He signed a payment plan, kept his every other holiday visitation he'd never once used, and drove his loud car back down whatever road he came from. The whole thing, start to finish, took 11 weeks. The town, to its credit, took Nora's side so completely that the ladies in the corner booth started leaving her 30% tips, which in Alder Creek is a formal apology. It was March when it finally happened. Mud season when the hill turns to chocolate cake and the whole state smells like thaw. Nora came up to return my drill, which she had borrowed, I want the record to show, because she was installing a shelf herself and had refused my help on principle. Ellie was at a birthday party. The valley was doing that thing it does on the first warm evening, gold light lying down in the low field, every wet branch shining. She handed me the drill on the porch and didn't leave. I didn't go in. We stood there like two people who'd run out of repairs. The shelf come out level? I asked. Perfect, she said. I checked it twice. Used your level. Stole it, actually. It's still at the house. That's a theft, ma'am. Of my most important tool. You'll have to come get it, then. The light moved. Somewhere down the hill, snowmelt ran loud in the ditch. Nora, I said, I need to tell you something, and I need to do it badly, because I've only ever practiced saying it to the dog, and I don't have a dog." She laughed, and then she saw my face and stopped. "For 3 years, everybody in that town has called me the widower on the hill, and I let them, because it was true, and because it was easier to be a landmark than a man. Landmarks don't have to want anything." My voice went rough, and I let it. "Then your kid ran through 200 people and picked me. And then you stood on a board with me, and another one, and somewhere in there I stopped dreading the quiet, because the quiet had your coffee in it, and her cartoons, and I stopped, and started again, level and simple, the way I'd say the truest measurements. I'm not asking you to replace anybody, and I'm not offering to replace anybody. I'm asking if I can pick up the other end of the board. For good, yours and hers." Nora's eyes were shining, but her voice came out steady, and a little amused and entirely hers. "You're the only man I've ever met," she said, "who proposes carpentry. It's the only language I'm fluent in." "I know," she said. "It's why I trust it." And she stepped across the last 16 feet of distance, and she kissed me, slow and certain, on the porch of the house my grandfather built and my wife made beautiful, and there was no ghost in it and no guilt in it. It felt like a beam coming down true onto a post that had been waiting, plumb and patient, for exactly this wait. When she pulled back, she stayed close, forehead against mine. "The light's still on at the cottage," she murmured. "I have to get Ellie at 7. "I know." "Come with me." "I know," I said again like an idiot, and she laughed against my cheek, and we drove down the hill together. We got married the following October, 1 year to the week after a lost girl in red rain boots changed my name. We didn't do it at a church or a hall. We did it in the orchard behind the house, under the apple trees, 40 people, folding chairs, Walt crying behind his beard and pretending it was allergies. Nora wore a blue dress and no scarf in her hair, and she walked herself down the aisle, because, as she told Diane the lawyer, she'd spent 6 years being handed from one keeping to another, and she intended to arrive at this one on her own 2 feet. Ellie was the flower girl, the ring bearer, and the self-appointed event supervisor, a triple role she executed with a clipboard she could not read. The cottage didn't go dark, in case you're wondering. Hannah's rule still stands. A young teacher lives there now, first job, first winter, and her rent is whatever Marjorie decided was kind. Some promises you keep late, you keep them anyway. And Ellie, who is 7 now, who has a yellow room in the farmhouse and a purple mug with a chipped handle that nobody is allowed to throw away. For a long while, she called me Caleb, and that was right, and nobody pushed. Then one evening in our first winter as a family, she was at the kitchen table fighting her math homework, and the page tore, and frustration hit her the way it hits the small and tired all at once, and she put her head down and wailed one word at the ceiling. "Dad." Then she froze, lifted her head, did the math on what she'd said, this kid who hates math. The kitchen went very quiet. Nora, at the stove, didn't turn around, but I saw her shoulders go still, the listening kind of still. "That's me," I said, and pulled up a chair. "Let's see this terrible homework." Ellie studied me for a second, the same long, deciding look she'd given me at the fair, age 5, mid-disaster. Whatever she was checking for, she found it, because she nodded once like a foreman approving a beam and shoved the torn page across the table and never called me anything else again. People ask me sometimes, the new people, the ones who moved to town and only know the story secondhand, how it all started. And I tell them the truth. It started with a mistake. A scared little girl grabbed the wrong man at a fall fair and called him daddy in front of half the county. But here's what I've learned, fixing other people's houses for 20 years and finally letting somebody fix mine. The level doesn't care how the beam got there. Dropped, drifted, carried, mistaken. It only measures one thing, whether it's true now. She called me dad by mistake. I've spent every day since making sure it isn't one.